They say every child deserves a parent, but not every parent deserves a child. Few stories illustrate this truth more brutally than the one of Mick Philpot, a man who saw his children as little more than financial assets. Instead of providing them with love and protection, he saw them as dollar signs, using their lives to fuel his greed and twisted ambitions. Today, we'll unravel the tragic story of how Mick Philpot and his accomplices took the lives of 6 innocent children, all in a deranged scheme to manipulate the system and gain attention. This case is a haunting reminder of how deep-rooted selfishness and manipulation can turn even the most sacred relationships into acts of horror. Mick Philpot was born in 1956 in Derby, England. He grew up troubled and violent, ultimately becoming infamous for fathering 17 children with multiple women. But these children were not products of love. In reality, Philpot was a cruel and narcissistic man who saw children as pawns in his disturbing scheme to exploit government benefits. He believed that the more children he had, the more money he could get from the state, a twisted logic that would cost his family dearly. Philpot's first relationship hinted at the horrors to come. At age 19, he started dating Kim Hill, a 15-year-old girl. At first, he seemed like the perfect partner, but soon his charm turned into rage. He became violently abusive, even hitting Kim in public. His abuse escalated to near-fatal extremes. He once struck her across the face with a pool cue in a crowded pub, but no one dared intervene. Philpot saw any show of independence from Kim as a threat. Once, after accusing her of paying too much attention to a baby she was caring for, he broke her arm and fractured her kneecap with a hammer. His attacks reached a horrific climax when, after she attempted to leave him, he broke into her home, stabbing her 27 times with a 9-inch knife, leaving her barely clinging to life. She died twice, once in the ambulance, once on the operating table, before being revived. Philpot was sentenced to just 7 years in prison for attempted murder, but served only 3, an early release that would pave the way for his continued violence. Philpot went on to repeat his pattern of abuse with numerous women, each time seeking vulnerable, young partners who he could easily manipulate. After his release from prison, he married a woman named Pamela, with whom he had 3 children. But his cruelty only continued. Pamela, terrified by his volatile nature, was too afraid to report his abuse, knowing what had happened to Kim. Hoping he'd eventually leave her, she remained silent until he moved on to his next target, a teenage girl named Heather Kehoe. Heather was only 14 when she entered into a relationship with the 37-year-old Philpot. She later described him as a Jekyll and Hyde figure who could turn from charming to monstrous in an instant. By the time she turned 16, Heather had 2 children with him and endured regular beatings. When she tried to escape, he held a knife to her throat, teaching his older children to act violently toward her as well. She eventually fled, temporarily leaving her children behind, and fought a long court battle to regain custody. For Philpot, his pattern was clear: charm young, vulnerable women, abuse them, and father children whom he could use for personal gain. In 2000, Philpot found his next target, a 19-year-old single mother named Mairead Duffy. She moved in with him, and before long, they had a child together. Not long after, he began dating a 16-year-old named Lisa Willis, who also moved in with Philpot and Mairead, creating an unusual domestic arrangement. By 2003, Philpot, Mairead, and Lisa were living in a cramped 3-bedroom council house with 11 children. While both women worked to provide for the family, Philpot remained unemployed, collecting their earnings and government benefits, while also demanding a larger house from local authorities. Philpot became a media spectacle in 2007 when he appeared on The Jeremy Kyle Show, a talk show similar to Jerry Springer where he defended his lifestyle and unemployment, blaming his inability to work on his criminal record and the media's portrayal of him. He flaunted his unconventional family arrangement, introducing both Mairead and Lisa as his wives. In a bizarre and heated exchange with the host, Philpot boasted about having had a vasectomy and taunted those who questioned his parenting and his lifestyle. By this point, he was already notorious as Britain's biggest scrounger, raking in an estimated £25,000 a year in benefits. But cracks began to show in the fragile dynamics of Philpot's household. In February 2012, Lisa finally had enough of Philpot's manipulation and abuse. She took her 5 children and left, moving in secretly with her sister to avoid confrontation. Enraged, Philpot felt betrayed. He saw Lisa's departure not only as a personal affront, but as a financial blow. Losing her children meant losing a significant portion of his benefit payments. Philpot wanted revenge, and he hatched a deadly plan to win back control and continue his scheme. His twisted solution: burn down his own house. He believed he could frame Lisa for the crime, cast himself as the grieving father, and reclaim custody of the children he saw as income sources. Philpot enlisted Mairead and a family friend named Paul Mosley to carry out the plan. Together, they devised a scheme to start a fire in the middle of the night, making it look as though Lisa had been responsible. Philpot even planned to heroically rescue his children from the blaze, using the incident as leverage in his ongoing custody battle. But on May 11th, 2012, everything went tragically wrong. In the early hours of the morning, Philpot and Mosley poured gasoline through the mail slot and set the house ablaze. The fire spread faster than anyone anticipated, turning their twisted plot into a deadly inferno. Instead of being the hero, Philpot found himself trapped outside, while his children were engulfed in flames. 6 young lives, Jade, John, Jack, Jesse, Jaden, and Dwayne, were lost, all victims of smoke inhalation. These children, aged between 5 and 13, had no chance of survival in the flames that tore through their small, cramped home. In the immediate aftermath, Philpot tried to play the grieving father, but his behavior raised suspicions. Witnesses described him as disturbingly unbothered, even joking with police officers and showing none of the expected grief. He and Mairead held a public press conference where they awkwardly thanked the community and requested privacy. Philpot's strange, detached demeanor, however, only deepened investigators' doubts. Forensic evidence soon exposed the terrible truth. Traces of petrol on Philpot's clothing, combined with surveillance recordings, revealed that he, Mairead, and Mosley had orchestrated the fire. In these recordings, Philpot was heard coaching Mairead and Mosley on how to keep their stories straight, ensuring they'd avoid suspicion. Their conversations, peppered with chilling remarks about the fire, sealed their fate. On April 2nd, 2013, Mick Philpot, Mairead, and Paul Mosley were convicted of manslaughter. Philpot received a life sentence with a minimum of 15 years, while Mairead and Mosley each received 17-year sentences. Mairead was released in 2020 after serving just half of her sentence, a decision met with public outrage. Paul Mosley was also released, but was returned to prison after violating his parole. Today, Mick Philpot remains in prison, while Mairead and Mosley walk free. Having completed their reduced sentences, Philpot has been labeled a psychopath, a man who exploited government assistance and manipulated the lives of those closest to him. For Philpot, his children were never more than tools for personal gain, and the devastating consequences of his actions will haunt those affected for a lifetime. This case stands as a haunting reminder of the dangers of unchecked manipulation and greed, and leaves us with lingering questions. What if the justice system had been harsher after Philpot's first crimes? Could these innocent lives have been saved?